بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا Muhammad Jarda. They forced him to leave Mecca. Years later, he returned.
There are moments in history that people remember because of armies, battles, kings, and the fall of powerful nations. But then there are moments that history remembers for something much deeper. The character of a human being when he finally has power over those who once had power over him. The conquest of Makkah was one of those moments. It was not simply the day Muslims entered the city they had once been forced to leave. It was not simply a political victory or the end of a long struggle. It was a moment when the world witnessed what victory looks like when it is guided by faith, humility, justice, and mercy. Years before this moment, Mecca had been the home of the Prophet Muhammad. It was the city where he was born, the city where he grew up, and the city where he received the first revelation from Allah. But it was also the city where the early Muslims faced some of the most painful persecution. The message of Islam challenged the beliefs, pride, and interests of the powerful people of Quraysh. Instead of listening with an open heart, many responded with hostility. The believers were mocked, threatened, tortured, isolated, and pressured to abandon their faith. Some Muslims were physically abused. Others were separated from their families. Some were forced to leave their homes. The Prophet himself faced insults, rejection, and relentless opposition. Yet through all of this, he continued calling people toward the worship of Allah and toward truth. Eventually, the persecution became so severe that the Muslims migrated to Medina. Leaving Mecca was not simply moving from one city to another. For many of the companions, it meant leaving behind their homes, businesses, relatives, possessions, and memories. They were leaving because they wanted to protect their faith and build a community where they could worship Allah freely. Imagine leaving the city where you were born because you are no longer safe there. Imagine watching your home disappear behind you, knowing you may never return. Imagine carrying pain from people who once called you family, neighbors, or friends. Yet the believers continued forward, trusting Allah. In Medina, the Muslim community grew stronger. The Prophet established a community based on faith, brotherhood, responsibility, justice, and worship. But the past did not disappear. The conflict with Quraysh continued, and the Muslims faced several difficult moments. There were battles, broken agreements, sacrifices, and losses. Through every stage, the Prophet remained focused on his mission. He was not building a life around revenge. He was building a community around obedience to Allah. Then came a major turning point. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah had created a period of peace between the Muslims and Quraysh, allowing people to travel and interact more freely. But the agreement was eventually violated when an ally of Quraysh attacked an ally of the Muslims. The situation changed. The Muslims now had the right to respond, and the Prophet prepared for a major journey. But there was something remarkable about what happened next. The Muslims were moving toward Mecca, the very city that had once driven them away. They were returning not as helpless individuals, but as a strong Muslim community. Think about what that must have meant for the companions. Some of them had left Mecca years earlier with tears in their eyes. Some had been tortured there. Some had lost loved ones there. Some had been forced to leave behind everything they owned. Now they were approaching the city again. They had strength. They had numbers. They had the ability to take control. And with strength comes a test that is often harder than weakness. What will you do when you finally have the power to respond? When you are powerless, patience may be your only option. But when you become powerful, patience becomes a choice. When you have the ability to punish someone, choosing mercy becomes a reflection of your character. This is where the story of the conquest of Makkah becomes more than history. It becomes a mirror for every human heart. The Prophet entered Makkah with humility rather than arrogance. The city that had once rejected him was now opening before him. But he did not enter as a man intoxicated by revenge. He entered as a servant of Allah. The Prophet demonstrated that victory should make a believer more humble, not more arrogant. When people gain power, they sometimes begin to believe that power gives them permission to do whatever they want. They use success to humiliate those who once doubted them. They use influence to settle old arguments. They use money to control people. They use status to remind others of their weakness. But the Prophet showed something completely different. His victory did not make him forget mercy. His strength did not make him forget Allah. His success did not make him forget the pain of others. This is one of the most powerful lessons from the conquest of Makkah. Your character is tested not only when you lose, but also when you win. It is easy to talk about forgiveness when you have no power. It is much harder to forgive when you finally have the opportunity to take revenge. It is easy to say that revenge is wrong when nobody has harmed you. It is harder when someone has genuinely wounded your heart. The people of Makkah had opposed the Prophet for years. Yet, when the city came under Muslim control, the moment was not transformed into an uncontrolled scene of revenge. Instead, mercy became one of the defining features of the victory. The Prophet did not teach the companions to become cruel simply because they had been treated cruelly. He did not allow victory to become an excuse for arrogance. They were matters of justice, and individuals who were not simply treated as though serious crimes had never occurred. But the overall message of the conquest was not blind revenge. It was a victory governed by principle. This distinction is important because Islam does not teach us that mercy means ignoring every injustice. Mercy does not mean allowing someone to continue harming you. Mercy does not mean refusing justice. Mercy means that even when you have the right and ability to respond, you do not allow hatred to control your heart. There are times when justice is necessary, and there are times when forgiveness is more beautiful. Wisdom is knowing the difference. The Prophet showed this wisdom. The conquest was not about satisfying personal anger. It was about establishing the truth and removing the barriers that had stood against the message of Islam. And when the people of Makkah saw the conduct of the Muslims, something powerful happened. The people who had once believed that the Muslims would return seeking revenge were confronted with a different reality. They saw a community that had suffered but had not become consumed by hatred. They saw strength without uncontrolled cruelty. They saw victory without the arrogance they might have expected. This is why the conquest of Makkah carries such emotional power. The Prophet had every human reason to remember the pain of the past, but he did not allow the past to dictate his character. And that lesson reaches us today in a world where people often hold on to old wounds for years. Maybe someone hurt you when you were younger. Maybe a friend betrayed you. Maybe someone embarrassed you in front of others. Maybe a relative misunderstood you. Maybe someone walked away when you needed them most. Maybe you were rejected by someone you trusted. And now, even though years have passed, you still replay the situation in your mind. You imagine what you should have said. You imagine how you could have responded. You imagine the day when you will finally prove them wrong. But ask yourself, how much of your heart is being occupied by something that happened in the past? The person who hurt you may have moved on, but you are still carrying the weight. The Prophet teaches us a better path. You do not have to become cruel because someone was cruel to you. You do not have to become dishonest because someone lied to you. You do not have to become hateful because someone hated you. Your character belongs to you, and ultimately your choices are between you and Allah. Someone else's behavior does not have to decide who you become. This is where mercy becomes powerful. Mercy is not saying that the pain did not matter. Mercy is saying that the pain will not control the rest of your life. Forgiveness does not always mean returning to the same relationship. Sometimes forgiveness simply means that you stop feeding the anger. You stop wishing destruction upon someone. You stop allowing an old memory to steal today's peace. You place the matter before Allah and continue walking forward. The conquest of Makkah teaches us that there is a difference between remembering a lesson and carrying a grudge. Remember the lesson, but do not let the wound become your identity. Protect yourself, but do not become consumed by revenge. Set boundaries when necessary, but do not allow hatred to become your personality. And when Allah gives you a position of strength, remember the one who gave you that strength. The Prophet had not forgotten the hardships of Makkah, but he demonstrated that remembering the past does not require living in revenge. There is another beautiful lesson here. Real victory belongs to Allah. The believers did not conquer Makkah because they were naturally stronger than everyone else. Their journey had been filled with moments when they appeared weak. They were once a small community. They had been persecuted. They had migrated. They had experienced difficult battles and painful losses. Yet Allah changed their circumstances. This should teach us something about our own lives. Never assume that your current situation is the final chapter. The person who feels weak today may become strong tomorrow. The person who is rejected today may be honored tomorrow. The person who is struggling today may one day look back and realize that Allah was preparing them for something they could not yet understand. But when that day comes, remember Makkah. Remember what victory should look like. If Allah lifts you after hardship, do not become arrogant. If Allah gives you success after failure, do not humiliate those who doubted you. If Allah gives you wealth after poverty, do not look down upon those who have less. If Allah gives you influence after being ignored, use it to help people rather than control them. If Allah gives you peace after heartbreak, do not use your healing as a weapon against the person who hurt you. Your victory is a test, just as your hardship was a test. Sometimes we think only difficult moments test our faith, but blessings test us too. Power tests us. Money tests us. Success tests us. Popularity tests us. Forgiveness tests us. The question is always the same. What will you do with what Allah has given you? The conquest of Makkah also reminds us of the importance of humility. The Prophet could have entered Makkah surrounded by people celebrating their victory, but his conduct reflected submission to Allah. This is a lesson for anyone who experiences success. The higher you rise, the more you should remember where your strength came from. You did not create your own opportunities. You did not control every door that opened for you. You did not guarantee your own health, wealth, intelligence, or abilities. Everything is ultimately from Allah. So when success arrives, say Alhamdulillah rather than becoming proud. When people praise you, remember that Allah knows your weaknesses. When people respect you, remember that your true worth is connected to your relationship with your Creator. The conquest of Makkah is therefore a story of power, but it is also a story of humility. It is a story of victory, but also a story of mercy. It is a story of returning home, but also a story of letting go of the desire for revenge. And perhaps the most important part of the story for us is what happens inside the heart after the victory. Imagine finally getting what you wanted. Imagine finally proving yourself. Imagine finally standing in a position where nobody can hurt you the way they once did. What will you do then? Will you become like the people who hurt you? Or will you become better because of what you went through? This is the real challenge. Pain can make you bitter, or it can make you wiser. Rejection can make you arrogant, or it can make you compassionate. Hardship can make you hopeless, or it can bring you closer to Allah. The choice is not always easy, but the example of the Prophet gives us direction. He faced enormous hardship without allowing hardship to destroy his mercy. That does not mean he was weak. He was courageous. He stood for truth. He defended the Muslim community. He made difficult decisions. But his strength was controlled by revelation and wisdom. That is the balance Muslims need today. We should not confuse kindness with weakness or anger with strength. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is the one who refuses to let anger control their tongue. Sometimes the strongest response is silence. Sometimes the strongest response is forgiveness. Sometimes the strongest response is walking away. And sometimes the strongest response is standing firmly for justice without hatred in your heart. The conquest of Makkah gives us a framework for understanding this balance. It teaches us that mercy is not something reserved for people who have never been hurt. Mercy becomes most meaningful when it is offered by someone who knows what pain feels like. This is why the story remains relevant more than 14 centuries later. We may not be conquering cities, but every day we face smaller battles inside our homes, friendships, workplaces, classrooms, and communities. Someone says something hurtful. Someone misunderstands us. Someone takes credit for our work. Someone breaks a promise. Someone refuses to apologize. And then our ego tells us, now it is your turn. But before responding, remember the lessons of Makkah. Ask yourself, will this response make me a better Muslim? Will it bring me closer to Allah? Am I seeking justice, or am I simply trying to satisfy my anger? Am I protecting myself, or am I trying to hurt someone because I was hurt? These questions can save us from many regrets. And if you are someone who has been deeply hurt, remember this too. Forgiveness is a journey. You do not have to pretend that everything is fine. You can ask Allah to heal your heart gradually. You can forgive while maintaining distance. You can release the desire for revenge while still remembering the lesson. You can move forward without reopening a door that should remain closed. Allah knows your heart. He knows the nights when you cried. He knows the things you never told anyone. He knows the betrayal you cannot explain. He knows the injustice you experienced. You do not need to destroy another person to prove that you were hurt. Leave what you cannot control with Allah and focus on what you can control. Your faith, your character, your choices, and your response. Perhaps one of the greatest forms of healing is reaching the point where someone else's actions no longer determine your peace. And perhaps one of the greatest forms of victory is becoming the person you wanted to be before someone hurt you. Do not let betrayal turn you into a betrayer. Do not let cruelty turn you into a cruel person. Do not let rejection make you reject everyone. Do not let one painful relationship convince you that everyone is against you. Take the lesson, seek Allah, and continue forward. The Prophet did not allow the pain of Makkah to erase the mercy of his mission. And we should not allow the pain of our lives to erase the goodness Allah wants us to carry. The conquest of Makkah also teaches us something about leadership in our families and communities. If you are a parent, teacher, manager, elder, or simply someone with influence over another person, remember that your power is a responsibility. When someone makes a mistake, ask whether correction can be given with dignity. When someone apologizes sincerely, consider whether forgiveness is possible. When you become stronger than someone who once treated you badly, do not use your new position to humiliate them. People may forget the words you spoke, but they often remember how you made them feel when you had power over them. The Prophet showed a form of leadership that transformed hearts rather than simply controlling people. That is why his example remains so powerful. The conquest of Makkah was not simply about entering a city. It was about demonstrating what happens when strength is placed under the command of faith. It showed that victory can be accompanied by humility, authority can be accompanied by mercy, and justice can exist without hatred. Today, perhaps Allah is giving you a smaller version of your own Makkah. Perhaps you are standing at the doorway of a new chapter after years of hardship. Perhaps you are finally succeeding after being ignored. Perhaps you have healed after being hurt. Perhaps someone who once looked down on you now sees your progress. If that is your situation, remember this story. Do not turn your blessing into revenge. Do not make your success a punishment for someone else. Let your success be an act of gratitude to Allah. Let your healing make you softer toward others, not harder. Let your experience teach you compassion. And if you are still waiting for your victory, remember that Allah's timing is different from ours. The believers waited, they struggled, they endured, they trusted Allah, and eventually the door opened. Your door may open differently. Your victory may not look like the victory you imagined. Maybe your victory will be peace after anxiety. Maybe it will be guidance after confusion. Maybe it will be a better character after hardship. Maybe it will be leaving a harmful situation. Maybe it will be rebuilding your relationship with Allah. Do not limit victory to worldly success. Sometimes Allah's greatest gift is changing your heart. Because if you gain the whole world but lose your connection with Allah, what have you truly gained? And if you lose something from this world but become closer to Allah, perhaps what you thought was a loss was actually part of your salvation. The conquest of Makkah reminds us that Allah can change circumstances completely. The oppressed can become strong. The rejected can return with dignity. The wounded can heal. The closed door can open. But when Allah gives you the victory you prayed for, remember to carry mercy with you. Because the real beauty of victory is not making others feel defeated. It is proving that hardship did not destroy your character. So if someone has hurt you, ask Allah for strength. If someone has wronged you, seek justice when justice is needed, but do not surrender your heart to hatred. If you have the opportunity to forgive, consider the beauty of forgiveness. If you are successful, remain humble. If you are powerful, remain responsible. If you are honored, remain grateful. And if you return to a place that once broke your heart, remember that you do not have to become the person who hurt you. You can return with dignity. You can return with faith. You can return with mercy. The story of the conquest of Makkah is therefore not just a story from the past. It is a lesson for every person who has ever been hurt, rejected, underestimated, or forced to start again. It tells us that circumstances can change, but our character must remain connected to Allah. It tells us that victory is not permission to become arrogant. It tells us that forgiveness can be more powerful than revenge. And it tells us that the strongest heart is not necessarily the heart that never feels pain. It is the heart that feels pain but still chooses what pleases Allah. One day, your life may give you an opportunity to respond to someone who once hurt you. In that moment, remember Makkah. Remember that you have a choice. You can give your anger the microphone, or you can give your faith the final word. You can allow the past to control your future, or you can place the past in Allah's hands and walk forward. You can use your strength to hurt, or you can use it to heal. You can make your victory about yourself, or you can make it a reason to become more grateful to Allah. The conquest of Makkah teaches us that the greatest victory is not always the moment when you stand above your enemy. Sometimes the greatest victory is when you stand above your own anger. Sometimes it is when you forgive without becoming weak. Sometimes it is when you choose dignity instead of revenge. Sometimes it is when you finally understand that you do not need to make someone else suffer in order to prove that you have healed. And perhaps that is the message Allah wants us to carry from this remarkable event. When victory comes, let mercy come with it. When strength comes, let humility come with it. When success comes, let gratitude come with it. And when the opportunity for revenge comes, remember that Allah sees what is inside your heart. May Allah help us learn from the example of His beloved Messenger Muhammad. Give us hearts that are strong without becoming hard. Give us courage without arrogance. Give us justice without hatred. And give us the wisdom to forgive when forgiveness is best. May Allah heal those carrying old wounds, guide those struggling with anger, strengthen those facing injustice, and help every one of us become better because of our hardships rather than bitter because of them. And may we always remember that the conquest of Makkah was not only a story of a city being conquered. It was a powerful demonstration that when faith guides power, victory can become a moment of mercy. Ameen.